Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Mark Seifter, Design Manager at Paizo, and one of the two cover authors of Secrets of Magic.
Which we're going to talk about today. I'm very excited about this book. I have to admit, at first, when first heard about it, it was going to be, oh, it's just going to be a collection of magic spells and maybe some magic items at the end. But this is a much more immersive book. It's almost
Yeah.
like a version of the Advanced Player's Guide in a way. Because you really get into these like schools of magic and things like that. Was that the goal behind this book?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I might say it's even more immersive than the Advanced Player's Guide, because the design lead for Secrets of Magic, Logan Bonner, who's the lead designer for Pathfinder overall, he kind of had a vision with this book that, Advanced Player's Guide was the final piece in the puzzle of sort of the four table legs of the edition, with the core rulebook, bestiary, and game mastery guide as the other three legs. Advanced Player's Guide really gave enough player material to just play the Pathfinder Second Edition. And so it more was a list of things and rules and mechanics, like you were saying, with spells and magic items. Could be a Secrets of Magic style book. But with this book, Logan's view was he wanted to have us make a book that not only did it have huge amounts of content that just anybody can use in their game, and it does have like 200 spells or something like that, but that it also would have immersive information like you were talking about, that would be the kind of thing that you might be interested to keep on your shelf and pull out someday later when you're not running Pathfinder Second Edition and you just kind of want to read about magic, which you can sometimes get from magic books if they're done really well. And so it's a high goal. It's a hard goal, but that's one that we're trying to hit here. And so that's why you'll see that there's not only new classes, new spells, new magic items, those kind of things, but there's also a section on treatises in worlds talking about like, what is magic? How does it work? What are the metaphysics of magic? And then also a book of unlimited magic at the end with just a large amount of creative magical concepts that can just kind of mix things up with magic.
Let's talk about the first section a little bit because Paizo could have just really created just spells, some new classes, some new options, and then that's it. But
Sure.
you went
And in
really.
first edition, we kind of did that, right? With Ultimate Magic. It kind of just was that, and people still bought it, but we wanted to do something special this time.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophy in the first section. You go deep into talk about the tools of creation and soul and path, like these two different thoughts of how magic works in the universe. What was the reasons for that, and were you inspired by anything particular for this section?
So we really wanted to show that, much like science in our world, or even science and belief in our world, really, because only wizards and certain other arcane scholars really think of magic to be like a science. We wanted it to show that in a fantasy world where magic is not like completely quantifiable, that there were so many different viewpoints and ways to look at magic, and not just have one unified voice. There's like, this is what magic is, this is it, but to show there are four traditions of magic in Pathfinder, arcane, which do look at magic kind of like a science, divine, where it's all about belief. Then there's primal, which is belief, but in more kind of physical things from the material world. And then there's occult, which does collect information, but it's very eclectic and like ephemeral information rather than like hard facts like arcane. So we wanted to have a treatise from each of the different traditions writing about magic, so you could see, wow, like they really think different things. And then I personally, one of the few sections that I just wrote myself was the treatise on magical essences. Those are the four fundamental essences that make up all of magic. And just like arcane, which is kind of rigorous facts about the material world, it has matter and mind are its two essences. And on the flip side, divine has the exact opposite. It's got life, which also has instincts and certain beliefs that are just ingrained in you, even if it's sort of unconscious and it's not part of what you're thinking in your forebrain. And then it's got spirit, which are the metaphysical building blocks of your soul, sort of the reverse of matter, which are the physical building blocks of your body. So it really gets into it in essence treatises. We wanted to talk about the schools of magic, like what do they mean, what do they symbolize, what are sort of some of the stereotypes you might think of someone who is based on those schools of magic, so that not only would this be valuable to GMs, but this is the kind of setting material that's super valuable to a player, because this can tell you about your character and the kinds of things your character is thinking of when they're using that kind of magic, when they're specializing in those particular schools or something like that. It's not like a primer on a country, which could be really interesting, but a lot of the time it's like, well, I don't want to read everything because the GM, some of that might be secret stuff that my character doesn't know. This is like, what is your day-to-day for your character? So we not only had treatises, but we had some sidebars that included information that was like, what are some ways that you might play with your Eidolon if you are a summoner who's trying to refocus by playing with your summoned creature? Or here's a prayer from the two deities from Pathfinder that are very, very different in philosophy that you might use to pray at the beginning of the day to get your spells. Just really look into, what does it feel like to be this person who casts these spells, rather than just, well, what are all the spells?
How connected is this book to like some of the other things that deal with magic? For example, Strength of Thousands, which is coming out very, very shortly, if not already, which is about colleges of magic.
Right.
Is this connected to that, or vice versa?
I would say that you do not need to buy Secrets of Magic to play Strength of Thousands, but it is an absolutely wonderful support book if you're playing Strength of Thousands. And Strength of Thousands is an amazing adventure class to play if you really like the kinds of things in Secrets of Magic. And that is because Strength of Thousands, exactly like you said, is based on the Magambia, which is the oldest magic school in the region and possibly the entire world of Golarion. And it's been around for like over 10,000 years, so it probably is the oldest magic school anywhere. And your characters are joining the new class of students at the Magambia. And so you continue as students, you can eventually become teachers, and you get some additional magic on top of whatever your class is. So you're always going to have magic, which means Secrets of Magic is going to be helpful for you there. And you're also participating in an academia subsystem I wrote for Strength of Thousands, where you are sort of like studying and getting better at some certain different traditional values that are held by the Magambia. So it's definitely going to be really useful if you have some of the spells and magic items from Secrets of Magic, but you don't need them if you don't want to. Just like the Mwangi Expanse setting book, which is all about the region where the Magambia exists, is an amazing book to own if you're going to do Strength of Thousands, because you'll know all about that region, but you don't have to, because Strength of Thousands does have all the information you need to run it.
So let's talk a little bit about the classes, or the two classes that you have here, Magus and Summoner.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about a lot about them, but I'll stick to the basic questions. What were your inspirations or thoughts behind creating these two classes? Where did the ideas come from?
All right. So for Pathfinder Second Edition, Logan wrote the Magus and I wrote the Summoner. And they were mainly based off of the stories and themes of the Pathfinder First Edition Magus and Summoner classes. That being said, those stories and themes are not always carried by like using the exact same mechanics from Pathfinder First Edition. So we really reimagined the mechanics to make them fit in with the themes of those characters from before. So the Magus is a character that mixes in magic with swordplay or weapon craft and can spell strength with a spell into their weapon. And they cast some spells, but they really blend them together. They're not just someone who has a sword and is pretty good with it and has spells and are pretty good with it, like someone who's multi-class in between wizard and fighter. The thing that makes a Magus is the fact that they blend them together and use them in ways that sort of work really well together, complement each other. And that, I think, is what Logan was looking for the entire time with Magus, is to how it can complement each other. And so there's a stance that lets you cast a spell and do more damage with your attacks, special stuff that happens when you put your magic into your weapons, and other ways that the two can synergize with each other in both directions. Now, when it comes to the Summoner is an archetype that is just very popular, and it can be very popular with new players as well, who just, I want to summon some really awesome thing like a dragon or an angel or something like that. In fact, my very first character for Pathfinder ever was in the Pathfinder First Edition playtest. I was playing a playtest Summoner. So when I was writing this class, I was very inspired by the stories from Pathfinder First Edition Summoners, and also just in media, just everywhere out there in TV shows and movies and books, there are characters who can like bring in this powerful being or entity to help them out. And so I made sure that the rules could help tell some of the stories that you might have with those types of characters, even in some little things. Like, for example, in Pathfinder First Edition, when your character goes to sleep, your Eidolon, that's your summoned creature, disappears. That was something that was added to the final version. In the playtest in First Edition, that wasn't the case. And my character had a story that basically she was having trouble and lived on the streets, but her Eidolon protected her while she was asleep. And so that actually didn't work in First Edition when the final came out, but it's something that you can do in Pathfinder Second Edition. If you're at 0 hit points and go unconscious from that, the Eidolon winks out, but you can go to sleep and have the Eidolon watch over you at that point.
If I may geek out a little bit, Summoner is probably, I'm so glad that Summoner's now in Pathfinder 2E, because it's one of my favorite things. When back in the day, when I used to play Palladium, the fantasy game, the Summoner was one of the OCCs, or the classes they had there. And it was just always great when you summon something, and then there's the role play aspect of it when you talk to someone, and the story progresses. And I'm really glad about the options you have here for like all the typical beings that you can interact with. Was that a lot of work to do to try to get all these elements to work together?
It actually was. It was probably one of the most technically challenging classes in terms of getting all those elements to get together. You're absolutely right. And not only from a story perspective and just from the immensity of the number of options that are in there, but like from a mechanical perspective as well. A lot of things about having these two separate characters and the ways that they take actions, you might like look at them at first and be like, well, okay, that's pretty good. It's not necessarily like that strong, and then you later find out it's really strong if you use them really efficiently together. Like, you can get some advantages between the Summoner and the Eidolon working together that are so efficient that like the Magus is also nodding and giving you a thumbs up and being like, yeah, you're doing well at mixing magic and weapons too. It's one thing that the two classes sort of have in common. And I wrote like a little section on how it's somewhere in one of the introductions on how the Magus and Summoner classes seem very different. It's in the book, but they have one thing in common, which is that they blend and synthesize and become more than the sum of their parts. With the Magus, it's weapon craft and spells. With the Summoner, it is Summoner and Eidolon.
So let's talk about spells and maybe a little bit about magic items.
Sure thing.
One thing I noticed off the bat was the number of influences that every section of the book, but particularly this section, or these two sections, so other magic compendium books of sorts, you look and usually it's just like a variation of other spells or it's tweaked in different ways. But this is all like, all right, this was inspired by China. This was inspired by Spain, Africa. Like, I was really impressed with that. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and the process of putting that together?
Well, I'm impressed that you noticed all of those different influences, because you're absolutely right that there are influences from around the world that are in this book, and you can see them in some of the spells. Like the idea of reading the air in particular to get a sense of the room is a very kind of thematic thing in several different Asian nations, for example. And obviously the fulus are from a traditional Asian item, but we absolutely did go to many different places around the world. You can see in the author list that we found authors who were experts on those particular areas. So, for example, the freelancer who is credited in additional writing as Sen HHS is from Taiwan, and I believe has a PhD in a related topic on, I think, Asian history or something very similar to that, and knows a huge amount about that. And so we brought in freelancers who, like, this was their culture, or both that and they've studied it deeply to make sure that we got it right. And that's sort of how we threaded through those particular themes, but we also picked certain mechanical themes to make sure that it didn't just feel like it's a hodgepodge of spells, like you said, but that there were certain through lines that you could look through and find. And you can see there's kind of an introduction to the spells chapter where some of these spells that are in the book are being described as if they were kind of a selection of spells that were being sent by one particular person to another person. It's sort of in the introduction where they're like, oh, the following grimoire contains magic of all schools, but there are some underlying themes within the spells I'd like to discuss with you. And then it even points out what some of those are, like minion magic or spells that work with your animal companion or familiar, polymorph, contingency spells, summoning spells, time magic, variable incantations, a new kind of magic called incarnate that's kind of more like a summon that you might see in other games where you just summon this ridiculously big, powerful thing. It just comes onto the battlefield, does something absurd, does some other absurd thing, and then leaves, rather than like, oh, I have a kind of weak creature, but it'll stay on the field for a really long time and do whatever I say. You got a stronger creature, but it doesn't stay for very long.
So if I may ask, what has been some of your, from this book, what would you say some of your like favorite spells or favorite magic items that you were happy to include in this book?
Okay, so I really like a lot of them, but I'm definitely biased towards some of the ones that I put in because I wrote some of them. So I'm certainly biased towards like there's a cantrip that can do some sonic damage in a cone. That one was pretty cool. I definitely like there's a high level spell, and I think it turns you into an like a bunch of snowflakes now. Frigid Flurry. Yeah, it was initially a lightning turning into lightning, but now you turn it to snow, which is even cooler. So there's definitely just a ton of really good spells. Those are two of them. Obviously, the incarnate spells are awesome. When it comes to magic items, I definitely like the sword or just weapon ability in general for melee weapons, where you can spend 2 actions and just have it extend 60 feet out and attack something. That one's pretty cool. I feel like it's both a powerful property, but it's also balanced because you have to spend an extra action and you're not having like flaming or something on to the weapon. So it's really neat. I like things that help like melee characters have a backup plan if there's a monster that's like flying around with a bow shooting at them. There's a lot of other really cool spells too. I like the spell hearts. Those are really neat. I like a lot of the new types of things. The catalysts for spells are pretty cool. I like grimoires. I want us to have more high level grimoires. We kind of did a cycle of low level ones for each school, and it's like those are cool. They're affordable. That's cool. But what powerful things could we do with a really high level grimoire? That would be even more exciting too. So yeah, no, I just like every one of these spells when I go through it and look at it, because I did do a pass on all of the spells. So I think about what I liked about it when I was working on it.
Excellent. Book of Unlimited Magic. So is this a section that helps players develop like archetypes?
So the Book of Unlimited Magic is just full of unusual variant ways to use magic
Mm.
that you might have in your game. Many of which are uncommon or rare because you might not have it in your game, but you might. So it allows players and the GM to work together to add some different flavors of magic into their story and their world, like cathartic magic, where you have this emotional fallout from the particular kinds of emotions that can give you benefits, but then a drawback afterwards. Or geomancy, where you kind of tap into a terrain around you to get extra benefits, and you can even like set up a pseudo terrain by casting a bunch of the same spell, like a bunch of cold spells to make the terrain sort of gain enough cold magic that it works like Arctic terrain for you later on. Or ley lines that kind of carry magic through the area and can boost your spells and things like that. So it kind of has different takes on magic that you can add to your game, and it will make it really exciting and different. Or soul forged armaments, which are kind of like you go through a transformation sequence and you get this ridiculous weapon or armor that has a once per day like superpower form, because all of those TV shows where you transform into your power mode also have the big one that they only do when the monster gets really strong at the end of the episode, right? Like with any of those kind of things, it's like, I will use my essence form. So there's just a lot of really cool things that you can do with the Book of Unlimited Magic by deciding to include certain components into your game. Like true names are going to be more of an investigative story because you try to research and figure out like what is the name of this creature to gain power of it. Whereas obviously soul forged armaments are kind of more of that kind of transformation sequence, power up battle mode kind of story, but it's also a story of keeping to your principles where your weapon can become corrupted if you don't. So each one kind of changes your story in a different way, and it does that by the story of the magic. So that's what I think is really cool.
Is there anything left that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share about this book?
Let's see. You've really done a good run through all the major chapters of the book. So I would say you've mostly covered it, but the most important thing is that the book contains ideas for stories and mechanics that you can use that work together. And it's like every part of the book has something that like players and GMs might want to use. And I think that's something cool, just because we touched on it a little earlier, but there's a prevailing notion that like if you put in lore that maybe it's for GMs, but I think this book shows that the lore can be very strongly for players too, when it's lore that helps you tie your character into the world.
Yeah, and it helps with role playing and making it. I mean, we all love the archetypes of Merlin and things and characters like that, but making your own—that's what makes it really special.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about
You're
this
welcome.
book. And now this is out now, right? So it'll be out
by the time this interview is up on September 1st. The book should be available, and you should be able to get the PDF on Paizo.com unless something else happened with the global shipping situation, which I'm not going to rule out. But assuming that didn't happen, yeah, it should be out, available at your favorite local game store and on Paizo.com.
So viewers, I hope you enjoyed this segment. Let us know what's your favorite spells or magic items in the comments below. Stay safe out there, get your shots, and have a great day, everyone.